Hello and welcome to the ELC grammar class. Our today's lecture is meant particularly for the intermediate level students who are preparing for their IELTS or who intend to sit other exams and are desirous of expressing themselves in a grammatically correct language. In English, it is often necessary to use an article before a noun. And there are two kinds of article: the definite article, the, or usually pronounced in natural speech, the, and the indefinite article, a or an, usually in natural speech pronounced as un. In order to speak or write English well, it is important to know how articles are used. Luckily for the students, wrong use of articles will not hamper communication much. The meaning in most cases gets communicated or conveyed. But if the other party happens to have some know-how of idiomatic English, certainly it will leave him or her with a bad taste in the mouth. So it is important to know how articles are used. Now, when deciding whether or not to use an article and which kind of article to use, you should ask the following questions. The first question is the noun countable or uncountable? The second, are you talking about things in general and people in general? And the third question is, are you talking about people and things in particular? Even the fourth question could be very much a possibility. Does the noun follow a special rule for the use of an article? But before we go into the nitty-gritty or the minutiae, the word might sound a little difficult. Minutiae, the exact minor details. We could even call it nitty-gritty, minutiae. But before I get into those minor details of the use of articles, let me tell you that articles are in fact adjectives. And nouns in English usually preceded by some sort of determiner. Now another question arises, what are determiners? A determiner is a word which is used with a noun, and it limits the meaning of the noun in some way. A determiner, a word which is used before a noun, and it limits the meaning of the noun in some way. The following can be used as determiners: articles, demonstratives, quantifiers, and possessive pronouns. Articles like a or an or the, pronounced with a strong accent, strong pronunciation. And then demonstratives, this and that, these, those. And then quantifiers like some, any. And then possessive pronouns like my, her, their, theirs, etc. So these are determiners. They are used before nouns in most cases as per the need of the situation. A very simple question. What are articles? I have already said they are adjectives. And that is why you will not find them under parts of speech discussed separately in any good grammar book. The grammar book will list nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, prepositions, conjunctions, interjections. Articles won't be there because articles are in fact adjectives. They come in front of nouns. They come before nouns because they seem to be almost a necessity in English. But as I have said before, I get into the minutiae or the exact minor important details, I'll give you an overview of the use of articles. The first important article is the, or in natural speech pronounced the, and it refers to a particular example of something. It refers to a particular example of something. How? How does it refer to a particular example of something? Number one, by referring to something which is known both to the speaker and the listener. By referring to something which is known both to the speaker and to the listener. For instance, if a sister asks her brother, "Where is the mother?" and he says, "She is in the garden." She is in the garden. It means that they both know where the garden of their house happens to be. So she is in the garden. Then he's at the post office, and normally somebody who happens to be saying this is referring to the post office that is known to both the listener and the speaker. He's at the post office. So something which is known to both the speaker and the listener, when you mean to talk about that, you use the or the. Then, by referring backward to something, backwards means पीछे की सिमत में जाके देखना है. कैसे? There is a man waiting outside. Who? The man in the brown coat? The man in the brown coat? The specifies or identifies the man. I could even say, well, I met a beggar this morning, and the beggar was wearing an expensive tweed coat. The beggar. When you are identifying and you have already been introduced to that man in the first sentence, I met a man, I met a beggar. The beggar was wearing an expensive tweed coat. So something that has already been referred to, you are talking about that, and the very fact that you are talking about something which has already been referred to makes that something or that person specific or identifies him. Then, number three, by referring forward to something. Forward. For instance, if I say, the chair in the living room is broken. The chair in the living room is broken. And then, by referring to something as a group or class, this is number 4. By referring to something as a group or class. If I say, the lion is a dangerous animal, means I'm talking about that particular type of wild animals. The lion is a dangerous animal. And then, if we now feel like knowing a little bit about the use of indefinite articles, the indefinite articles are used to refer to the nouns when you mean to say something about people or things in general. Indefinite. Talking about a person or persons or things in general means things that have not been already identified, things which have not been specified by the speakers. And how do we use it? Indefinite article, a or an, again in natural speech pronounced as a or an. By referring to one example of a group or class, by referring to one example of a group or class, pass me a pencil, please. Pass me a pencil, please. And then by referring to something as an example of a group or class, by referring to something as an example of a group or class. For instance, a dog is a friendly animal. A dog is a friendly animal. When nouns are used without an article in English, this is sometimes called zero article. Means when you don't need to append or put an article in front of a noun, we would consider that article which is absent a zero article. For example, cats like sleeping. Cats like sleeping. Comfort living animals, cats. And then silver is a precious metal. Silver is a precious metal. This was a brief overview of the use of articles. But as I said in the beginning, we shall now try to get into the minutiae, nitty-gritty. In English, as I have already maintained, it is often necessary to put an article before a noun. And I have already told you, you already know this, there are two kinds of article, and they are the definite article, the, and the indefinite article, or un. And we have already seen that it is important to know how articles are used. When you are in a fix, you do not know how to decide whether or not to use a certain article in a certain context. You should, as I have already told you, have a question to ask yourself. And the first question that we'll be talking about is the noun countable or uncountable? Countable, a very simple word, as the very word indicates, things which can be counted. Things which can be counted. One table, one chair, one boy, one girl. Tables, chairs, boys, girls, plural. Things that can be counted. But there are certain things which cannot be counted. We cannot say one wisdom or two wisdoms. We cannot say one water or two waters. We cannot say one gold or two golds. So, things which can be counted and things which cannot be counted. The first question that should come to your mind is the noun countable or uncountable? Now, we need to keep in mind the fact that singular countable nouns always need an article or another determiner, like, as I have already said, my, this, etc. I repeat, singular countable nouns always need an article or another determiner, like my, this, etc. Other nouns can sometimes be used alone. And the brief Longman's chart that I'll be benefiting from tells us a great deal about the use of countable nouns. And we'll get to know which article can be used with which type of noun. Let's get to the first things first. The definite article, the. And by the way, very frequently students ask us a question, and the question is, sir, when to pronounce the word the and when to pronounce the word the? The or the? Which one of the two to be pronounced? Or when to use a or an, a or un? Now, the thing that we need to keep in mind is whether or not we are familiar with the concept of vowel and consonant sounds. Please do keep in mind the fact that in the use of articles, what matters is not the vowel or consonant letter. It's the vowel or consonant sound. Vowel or consonant sound. And we know that if there is no closure or contact in the mouth or in the throat, when a certain sound is being produced or linguistically speaking articulated, then vowel sound. When there is no closure, when there is no contact, no narrowing in the mouth between any two organs of speech, like e, a, a, o, u. These are the 8 cardinal vowels. I'm not going to get into this detail, but I'm certainly trying to make you understand the fact that when there is no closure or contact between any two organs of speech in the mouth or in the throat, the sound produced is a vowel sound. But when there is either a complete closure or partial closure, like pa, ba, ta, da, ka, ga, when there is a complete, or sh and j, complete closure or partial closure, then you have a consonant sound. I repeat once again, when there is no contact or no narrowing, no closure in the mouth or in the throat between any two organs of speech, the sound produced will be a vowel sound. And when any two organs of speech either come into complete contact or they are partially in contact with each other, the sound produced would be a consonant sound. This difference is important to keep in mind because we keep talking about when to use the or the, and when to use a or an. If you listen to the news broadcast every evening or morning, whenever it is, the last sentence is most likely to be, "This is the end of the news." This is the end of the news. End beginning with an a vowel sound, the end. And n, the news, beginning with a consonant sound, and you say the news. Anyway, the as an article doesn't produce much difficulty because it can be used before singular countable nouns, it can be used before plural countable nouns, and it can also be used before uncountable nouns. I repeat, the or the can be used before singular countable nouns, plural countable nouns, uncountable nouns. Singular countable nouns, the bag, the apple. Plural countable nouns, the bags, the apples. Uncountable nouns, the water, the information. The information. By the way, talking about countable and uncountable nouns, information, we need to acquaint ourselves with countable and uncountable nouns in the target language. And the target language we know in our case is English. Most of our students make mistakes because of the first language interference. Because our Urdu tells us, "Ye daftar-e itlaat hai." इतलात का दफ्तर, कोई इतला चाहिए, इतलात चाहिए तो ये दफ्तर है जहाँ से मिलेंगी. But in English, information has no plural. In English, information has no plural. We don't say informations. And again, because of exhaustive, subtle discussion, why and how do languages differ? But the fact remains that we need to acquaint ourselves with nouns that are singular in the target language and plural in the target language, because in certain cases we may have different expressions in our own language. For instance, हम उर्दू में ये कभी नहीं कहते कि मेरे सर में एक दर्द है. But in English we say, I have a headache. And I am sure that if I want somebody to translate this sentence, I have a headache, the temptation would be to translate the word a to. जैसे ये कहना चाह रहा हो कोई कि मेरे सर में एक दर्द है. अब आपको पता है कि सर में दर्द एक नहीं होता, बस सर दर्द होता है. इंग्लिश में हम कहते हैं I have a headache. It means that headache in English is countable. And not so in Urdu. I am running a temperature. I have a fever. हम उर्दू में ये नहीं कहते कि मुझे एक बुखार है. जैसे दो भी हो सकने के थे, लेकिन इत्तफाक से, खुशकिस्मती से आज मुझे एक ही है. ये नहीं है. इसके माने ये हुए that we need to acquaint ourselves with singular and countable nouns in the two languages, that is our own language, and the mistakes that we will be making would generally be because of the first language, my own language, interference. My own language sometimes is likely to interfere with the language that I happen to be using. So the simple in this respect that it can be used before singular countable nouns, it can be used before plural countable nouns, and it can be used before uncountable nouns. Then comes a and an, or a and an, plus singular countable nouns. I have already said that they must be followed by, because a or an in Urdu they should mean koi ek. Koi ek. A and an. So it means that they have got to be there before countable nouns. A bag, an apple, and then no article. No article, or if at all a determiner is needed, it could be a determiner of quantity or number, like some or many or few. No article. No article may be there before plural countable nouns. Boys are boys. They have got to behave like boys. They'll be making mischiefs too. Boys are boys. No article. And we can say, well, if at all a determiner is needed, some boys, some bags, some apples. Uncountable nouns, water. If at all again a determiner is needed, some water. Or information. I have already said no article, but a quantifier, like some could be there. Some information. I need some information. So this was a brief account of the way the un, and no article situations are expressed. The dictionary, a good dictionary, always shows us when nouns are countable or uncountable, with the letter C or with the letter U. And if there is no article, that will mean that it is countable in all meanings. Now I'll be talking about some of the examples that can be used with countable and uncountable nouns. Countable nouns and uncountable nouns. Countable, a very simple, interesting insect, butterfly. Butterfly. And if I say The butterfly is an insect. The butterfly is an insect. I'm using the article the. The butterflies on that bush are very rare. The butterflies on that bush are very rare. She caught a butterfly in her net. There were some butterflies in the tree, and the garden is full of butterflies. So you notice that butterfly countable can be used almost in all situations depending on the meaning that is relevant in your particular situation. Again, when you use the word egg as a countable noun, the egg found in the fridge was bad. कभी कभी हम कहते हैं वो अंडा जो पड़ा हुआ था फ्रिज में वो गंदा था. The egg found in the fridge was bad. The eggs you bought last week have all been eaten. And then, I would like an egg for tea. I would like an egg for tea. And then, can you buy some eggs on your way home? He hates eggs without article. So countable, depending on the situation, the meaning that you wish to convey may require the definite article, may require the indefinite article, may require the determiner some, or maybe no article at all. But the situation gets a little interesting when the egg is used as an uncountable noun. Egg, now used as an uncountable noun. He wiped the egg from around his face. He wiped the egg. He wiped the egg from around his mouth. Would you like some scrambled egg? Would you like some scrambled egg with your toast? And then the baby had egg all over her face. Interesting. Uncountable. Egg used as an uncountable noun. And then the word information, it usually attracts my attention because students usually make mistakes while using this word. The information they gave us was wrong. The information they gave us was wrong. We would like some information, please. You happen to be at a counter, information counter, and you say, well, we would like some information, please. And then what we really need is information. What we really need is information, no article at all. So you notice that countable and uncountable nouns. The question asked was, is the noun countable or uncountable? So if it is countable or uncountable, this is how it should be used. The second question, very relevant in this discussion, is, are you talking about things and people in general? The second question is, are we talking about people and things in general? When nouns appear in general statements, they can be used with different articles depending on whether they are countable or uncountable. It means that nouns in general statements can be used with different articles depending on whether they are countable or uncountable. In general statements, countable nouns can be used in general statements. Countable nouns can be used, number one, in the plural without an article. In general statements, in the plural without an article. Elephants have tusks. Elephants have tusks. I like elephants. Plural, without an article. And in the singular with the elephant is a magnificent animal. Or somebody might say, he is studying the elephant in its natural habitat. He is studying the elephant in its natural habitat. So, singular with the. In the singular with a or an, a or an. An elephant can live for a long time. When you make an elephant stand for the whole group or class, an elephant can live for a long time. And we need to be mindful of the fact here that a or an can be used in this way if the noun happens to be the grammatical subject of the sentence. If this is how we are interested in using it, an elephant can live for a long time, the noun used as a subject has got to be the grammatical subject of the sentence. In general statements, uncountable nouns are always used without an article. Photography is a popular hobby, uncountable. Photography is a popular hobby. Water is essential to life. Water is essential to life. And then the other question that you should ask yourselves when we are deciding which particular article to use in a certain situation, are you talking about things and people in particular? Very interesting and very frequently occurring situation. Are you talking about things and people in particular? Nouns are more often used with a particular meaning. And by the way, here we need to be mindful of the fact that there is a little difference between particular and identifiable, specific. For instance, when I say I met a man in the street this morning, obviously he was a particular man that I spoke to or I happened to see, but I do not know who he was, where had he come from, what was he up to. I cannot identify him elaborately. I cannot say much about him. So I met a man, a particular man, but particular meanings can be definite or indefinite. This is what I'm trying to maintain. Particular, the man I met in the street was a particular man, but he can be definite or indefinite, and they need different articles accordingly. Definite. Now, if you are definite, both countable and the uncountable nouns are definite in meaning when the speaker and the hearer know exactly which people or things are being referred to. Definite when the speaker and the hearer both know exactly which people or things are being referred to. For example, the definite article the is used, number one, when the noun has already been mentioned. It's a very simple situation. When the noun has already been mentioned, I was only a short while ago, I was referring to, I met a beggar this morning. The beggar was wearing an expensive tweed coat. So I saw a man and a woman in the street. The man looked very cold. I saw a man and a woman in the street. The man looked very cold. The man. Again, I took her some paper and a pencil, but she said she didn't need the paper. She didn't need the paper. The paper. So, something that has already been referred to. Number 2, when it is clear from the situation which noun you mean. For instance, if I happen to be in a room and it's quite bright, I don't need a tube light switched on there, but the light is on already, and I say, well, would you mind switching off the light, please? The light. It means in that situation there is only one light, and the hearer knows which light I am referring to. So, when it is clear from the situation which noun you mean, at the dining table you say, well, could you pass the salt, please? Could you pass the salt? Means the salt on the table. I am going to the market. I am going to the market for some fruit. It means the listener knows which market I usually go to. So, when both know which noun is being referred to, article, definite article, the would be relevant. And when the words following the noun explain exactly which noun you mean. For instance, if I say, I've just spoken to the man from next door. I've just spoken to the man from next door. That is not just any man. Man from next door. The information that you gave me was wrong. Which information was wrong? That you gave me. The information that you gave me was wrong, not just any information. And then, when the person or thing is the only one that exists, when the person or thing is the only one that exists, I'm going to travel around the world. The world. There's only one world that we can be talking about. There's a beautiful spectacle on the sky. Sky. So when there's only one thing that exists, you use a definite article, the, before that. Now, the indefinite article. Nouns can also be used with a particular meaning without being definite. I repeat, nouns can also be used with a particular meaning without being definite. For example, in the sentence, I met a man in the street, the speaker is talking about one particular man, not all men in general. But we do not know exactly which man. So, particular doesn't always mean definite. And singular countable nouns with an indefinite meaning are used with the indefinite article, a or an. Would you like a cup of coffee? Would you like a cup of coffee? She is an engineer. She is an engineer. When their meaning is indefinite, plural countable nouns and uncountable nouns are used with some or any, depending on the context, or sometimes with no article. For instance, if I say, I think you owe me some money. I think you owe me some money. Have you got any money on you? We need some matches. We haven't got any biscuits. Would you like some coffee? Would you like coffee, tea, or orange juice? So this is how the whole thing could be summed up in a brief way as to the nitty-gritty, that we do not use the before lakes and do use before mountain ranges and oceans and seas, etc. I would recommend that you could consult any of the good grammar books like the one by English Grammar in Use by Raymond Murphy. English Grammar in Use by Raymond Murphy. Or there's another readily accessible grammar book, Oxford Practice Grammar by John Eastwood. There's another wonderful book with lots of information and graded excellent exercises, Practical English Grammar by Thompson and Martinet. I have just mentioned 3 books but if you could get hold of Basic English Usage by Michael Swan, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much.